Thanks for joining me on episode 380 of the Inspired Stewardship Podcast.
I'm Shannon Miles from Belay. I challenge you to discover your calling and find your third option so you can be empowered to live every day to the fullest. One way to be inspired to do that is to listen to this, the Inspired Stewardship Podcast with my friend, Scott Mader.
And let's talk a little bit, because one of the most common reasons that people will tell me that they continue to use credit cards is because of these wonderful reward points. You know, I flew to Europe on reward points, or I got this on reward points, or I get cash back if I use my credit card. And so I put everything on my credit card. And that's actually probably 100% true. They probably do.
Welcome and thank you for joining us on the Inspired Stewardship Podcast. If you truly desire to become the person who God wants you to be, then you must learn to use your time, your talent, and your treasures for your true calling. In the Inspired Stewardship Podcast, you will learn to invest in yourself, invest in others, and develop your influence so that you can impact the world.
In today's episode about investing in yourself through stewarding your treasures, I talk with you about why cash isn't the same as credit, how using cash or credit can affect your behavior, and why even if you get rewards, they aren't really free.
As we talk about stewarding your treasures, wouldn't it be great if you could support this podcast and do it without costing yourself an extra dime? Turns out you can. All you have to do is use inspiredstewardship.com/Amazon when you're ready to make a purchase via Amazon, and a small commission will come back to support the show. If you enjoy the show when you're ready to buy from Amazon, just use inspiredstewardship.com/Amazon.
I want to start this by mentioning that I work with clients of all sorts. I work with clients in business, I work with personal clients, and when it comes to money, one area that I end up talking to clients about a lot of times is around credit and using credit cards or other types of credit, 90 days same as cash, and all of these sorts of things that often lead to debt. And to be clear, it's not that I am anti-credit card. It's not that I feel like there's no possible way you could ever use a credit card and get ahead in life. It's not the school of thought that all credit cards are bad or evil or somehow or another doing harm to people directly. But what I can tell you is I do a lot of work on behavior and psychology and neurobiology and looking at how people's minds work and how our personalities work and how we approach different things in the world. And what I can tell you is when it comes to behavior, when it comes to mindset, when it comes to psychology, cash and credit are not the same thing. Not just because they're physically not the same thing. You know, obviously there's a difference between using cash and using credit, but because behaviorally, psychologically, what it does to your mind and to how you spend is measurably different. And studies have borne this out. So if you are going to choose to use credit, if that's something that you want, or for some reason you feel like it's needed, or it's something that gives you some sort of benefit, what I am going to do as a coach, what I am going to do as somebody that works with people in all sorts of different financial situations, is talk to you about the pros and cons. Talk to you about what is it about using credit that is different when it comes to your behavior, so that you're at least aware of it and hopefully can even modify that in some way, though I will tell you some of it is so deep-seated and deeply psychological that you can't really just change your behavior by just deciding to change it. It's actually a lot harder than that. And that's one of the reasons that if you're struggling with money, I'm almost certainly going to tell you that one of the best ways you can begin to reduce some of that struggle is to begin to use cash for certain key areas where it's very easy to overspend. Some typical ones for that are using cash for groceries, for eating out, and for sort of fun money, activity kind of money. fun money and eating out are probably the two areas that most people routinely overspend in, and moving those to cash can help with that. So let's talk about the psychology of it. Let's talk about why cash and credit are actually different from a mindset and behavior standpoint. There were a couple of big studies done back in the day where they looked at people's minds. They looked at what was active in people's brains when they spent money in different ways. Harvard did one of these. Carnegie Mellon did one of these. I've seen a couple of different references to various ones of these. And if you're interested, email me and I'll send you some actual copies of the actual report, the scientific report. I will tell you, I read technical papers. I read science reports. I know how to do it. They're not usually the most interesting reads on the planet. But if you want to actually go back to the original research, I can show you this original research. It's peer-reviewed research in scientific journals. And what it shows is that when they hook your brain up to a MRI and they look at what parts of your brain are active, and when you spend cash, part of the brain that lights up is the same part of the brain that lights up if you get hit in the face, if you feel pain, physical pain, if you actually get damage to your body. In other words, it hurts to spend cash. And if you think about that, you know it's true. If you've ever gone into a restaurant and handed them $100 bill and you know it's not coming back, or at least very little of it is coming back, it is a painful experience. It actually affects how you feel emotionally. And there are times that just that emotional feeling of this hurts to spend this money will modify your behavior. Suddenly, that shirt that you were about to buy doesn't look nearly as good when you're spending cash. But they were curious what was different when people spent credit. And so they had them also spend money using a credit card. And the pain center of the brain didn't light up at all. In fact, the only part of the brain that lit up was the pleasure centers. The pain center didn't activate. Because again, think about it. You know this is true. When do you feel the pain of spending on your credit card? It's not when you actually spend on the credit card. It's later when you sit down to pay the credit card bill. And the truth is, for most of us, that pain is distant enough in time that it doesn't affect our spending. We are much more likely to spend more when we spend with credit than when we spend with cash. And just to kind of complete the picture, they also looked at how people's brains activated whenever they spent using a debit card. And the truth is, what happened is the pain centers did light up, but not as bright as when they were spending cash. It wasn't as painful to use a debit card. It still reacted in pain, but less pain than using cash. And so what that means is if you want to modify your behavior in an area where you have a tendency to overspend, moving that to cash will actually slow that down. And let's talk a little bit, because one of the most common reasons that people will tell me that they continue to use credit cards is because of these wonderful reward points. I flew to Europe on reward points, or I got this on reward points, or I get cash back if I use my credit card. And so I put everything on my credit card. And that's actually probably 100% true. They probably do. But the truth is, first off, most people don't actually pay off their credit card every month. Most people will tell you, oh yeah, I pay off my credit card every single month. But when you actually audit it and go back and look, they will have paid interest many months out of the year. And usually those interest payments start to come close to the price of the reward points. But let's even give you the benefit of the doubt. Let's say that you truly do actually pay off your credit card every single month and you've never failed. How is it then that a credit card company can stay in business when they're giving away free airline miles and free this and free that and all the other things that they give away as rewards? How can they afford to do that? And the truth is, there's two other ways that credit card companies pay for rewards. Number one, every time you swipe a card at a merchant, the merchant actually pays a fee. It's 3, 4, 5% of the purchase price that is paid by the merchant, which means that merchants have to actually raise their prices for everybody so that they can pay for the credit card processing fees. That's unfortunate, but it's a reality. So you actually paid a little more when you bought whatever it is you bought. And number two, the other way that they pay for these things is really simple. Even if you don't ever pay interest, all of the studies show that when you spend on credit cards, because it doesn't register as pain in the brain, you spend on average 12 to 18% more over time. That means in a given year, if you put $10,000 on the credit card, 12 to 18% of that $10,000 you would not have spent if you were spending cash. Well, that means that there's several $1,000s there that they use to pay for those, quote, free rewards or that cash back that they give you. It's not worth what they're putting into it. And again, that's still best case scenario. Most people continue to actually have a balance from month to month. So if you've been trapped into this, if you're using credit cards for the reward points, examine your behavior. Identify if there's a few key areas where perhaps moving to cash and having that emotional connection and that pain connection would help you slow down your spending and help you actually spend less and make more so that you can live the life that you're supposed to live. Thanks for listening.
Thanks so much for listening to the Inspired Stewardship Podcast. As a subscriber and listener, we challenge you to not just sit back and passively listen, but act on what you've heard and find a way to live your calling. If you like this episode on the stewardship of treasures, you can sign up for our treasures tips by going to inspiredstewardship.com/treasures or text in the U.S. 44222 treasures tips. And we'll send you 5 weeks of our best tips on stewarding your treasures. Until next time, invest your time, your talent, and your treasures. Develop your influence and impact the world.